My name is Rachel Yoon. I am 31 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, and I am a certified public accountant specializing in forensic accounting and financial fraud detection. I find hidden money for a living. I trace where it went, who moved it, and exactly when the decision was made to make it disappear. And my mother laughed when I told her I had been laid off. It was a Thursday, October 3rd, at 6:18 p.m. I was sitting at her kitchen table in the house I had been quietly subsidizing for 4 years, still in the blazer I had worn to my termination meeting that morning. My severance letter was in my bag. My hands were flat on the table because I had learned, a long time ago, that flat hands do not shake. She was standing at the counter. She did not turn around immediately when I told her. There was a pause, 3 full seconds, and then the laugh came. Small. Controlled. The kind of laugh that is designed to sound like surprise but is actually something much older and much colder than that. She said, "Well, I always said that job was too much for you." My sister Hannah was at the table across from me. She looked down at her phone. That was her contribution. That was the whole of it. I did not respond. I counted the tiles on the backsplash behind my mother's head. 42. I had counted them before, in other difficult moments at that table, and the number had always been 42. Some things stay consistent. What my mother did not know, sitting in that kitchen with her small laugh and her practiced words, was that I had spent the previous 6 hours doing what I always do when something goes wrong. I had started building a file. Not an emotional file. Not a list of grievances. A financial file. Clean, sourced, and time-stamped. She did not know what was in it yet. She did not know what I knew about her accounts, her decisions, and the $73,441.18 she had moved through my name without my knowledge over the previous 26 months. She thought I had just lost my job. She had no idea what I had just found. Before I tell you what was in that file, I need to ask you something. Think carefully before you answer. Have you ever sat across from someone who was laughing at your worst moment, and realized, in that same breath, that you were the only one in the room who understood how badly they had already lost? My father left when I was 9. He did not leave dramatically. He left administratively, forwarded his mail, closed his joint accounts, and was gone by the second Tuesday of March 2002. What he left behind was a mortgage at 6.8% interest, 2 daughters, and a woman who immediately began reorganizing the family's financial architecture around whoever was most capable of bearing weight. That person was always me. I passed the CPA exam on my first attempt at age 23. I was hired at Mercer and Dalton Forensic Accounting in Austin within 6 weeks of receiving my license. My starting salary was $64,000. By year 3 it was $91,500. By year 6, the year I was laid off, it was $114,200 annually, plus a performance bonus that averaged $18,340 per year. My mother knew those numbers. I had made the mistake of telling her once, early on, when I still believed that her interest was pride rather than calculation. The request started small. $800 for a car repair in 2020. $1,200 for a dental bill Hannah had not budgeted for. A $3,400 payment toward my mother's property tax when her account ran short in April 2021. I paid each one without documentation because they were family, and because I believed that family operated on a different ledger than clients. I was wrong. Family operates on the same ledger, It is just the only ledger where you are never shown the balance. By the time I added it correctly, which I did on the morning of October 3rd, sitting in my car outside my office building 40 minutes after my termination meeting, the total direct transfers I had made to my mother's account since January 2020 came to $41,220 exactly. That figure I knew. I had tracked it myself. What I had not tracked was the other number. The $73,441.18 I mentioned, that figure did not come from my voluntary transfers. That figure appeared on a credit report I pulled at 11:22 a.m. using my professional access to Experian's commercial verification portal. 3 accounts. 2 credit cards and 1 personal line of credit. All opened between August 2021 and February 2023. All carrying my Social Security number as primary account holder. I had not opened any of them. I sat in that car for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I know because my phone screen was on and the clock was visible. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop, typed the date at the top, and began listing every account, every balance, and every origination date. The file had 41 entries before I started the drive to my mother's house. People who commit financial fraud against family members rely on one assumption. They assume that love is incompatible with forensic precision. They believe that the person who cares most will look the least carefully. In my professional experience, across 11 years of fraud detection work, that assumption is correct approximately 94% of the time. I am in the remaining 6%. The first tool I want to tell you about is called Clear by Thomson Reuters. It is an investigative research platform used by law enforcement, financial institutions, and forensic accountants to trace individuals, assets, and financial relationships. My firm's subscription cost $4,800 annually. When my employment ended on October 3rd, my firm access was revoked at 5 p.m. precisely. My personal subscription, which I had maintained separately since 2021 for independent consulting work, remained fully active. My mother had no idea it existed. Clear pulls from over 10,000 data sources simultaneously. Court records, property filings, business registrations, address histories, and financial associations. I had run preliminary searches on clients dozens of times. I had never run one on my own family. That changed at 7:34 p.m. on October 3rd, 40 minutes after I left my mother's kitchen. The second tool was Experian's Business ID verification portal, the same commercial access I had used that morning to pull the unauthorized credit report. My personal consulting license allowed 30 individual pulls per month. I had used 4 that month. I had 26 remaining. The third tool was a software platform called MindBridge AI Auditor. It is used to analyze financial transaction data and flag anomalous patterns. Irregular timing, unusual amounts, repetitive round number transfers, the kind of patterns that human eyes miss but algorithms catch within seconds. A single entity analysis license ran $2,200 per year. I had used it on 3 client fraud cases in the previous 18 months. Each case had resulted in a confirmed finding. I uploaded my own bank records at 8:11 p.m. All transaction data from January 2020 forward. For years. 1,847 individual entries. MindBridge returned its first anomaly flag at 8:19 p.m. 8 minutes. It identified a pattern of outgoing transfers, always between the 3rd and 7th of each month, always in amounts between $800 and $2,400, routed to 2 external accounts I did not recognize. I had authorized none of them. My online banking credentials had been used from an IP address registered to a residential router in Cedar Park, Texas. My mother's address is in Cedar Park, Texas. The fourth tool required no subscription. It was a manila folder, a black pen, and a numbering system I have used since my second year at Mercer and Dalton. Tab 1 through tab whatever. Evidence does not become powerful when you find it. It becomes powerful when you organize it so clearly that no one can look away. I labeled the first tab that night. I wrote the date in the top right corner. I underlined it once. Then I made coffee and kept working. The breaking point does not arrive like a wave. It arrives like a door closing. Quietly. Finally. With a click you feel more than hear. Mine arrived at 6:44 a.m. on October 7, 2024. I was at my desk with my third coffee, reviewing the MindBridge anomaly report for the fourth time, when I found the entry I had missed on the previous 3 passes. It was a transfer dated February 14, 2023, Valentine's Day, which I noted without sentiment, for $11,400 exactly. Round numbers in forensic accounting are a red flag. Legitimate expenses are rarely round. This one had been routed from my personal checking account at Frost Bank, account ending in 7732, to a business account registered under an LLC called HY Consulting Group. I ran HY Consulting Group through Clear at 6:51 a.m. The search returned results in 40 seconds. The LLC had been registered with the Texas Secretary of State on January 9, 2023. The registered agent was my sister Hannah. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened a new tab and kept working. The first administrative action I took was to contact Frost Bank's fraud division directly. Not the general customer service line. The fraud division, at their direct internal number, which I had on file from a client case in 2022. I reached an investigator named Daniel Marsh at 8:02 a.m. I reported unauthorized account access, provided the specific transaction dates and amounts, and requested an immediate account freeze pending formal investigation. He confirmed the freeze at 8:17 a.m. Account ending in 7732, frozen. Outgoing transactions suspended. The second action was a written dispute filed through Experian's commercial portal at 8:34 a.m., formally contesting all 3 unauthorized credit accounts carrying my Social Security number. Each dispute was filed separately, with supporting documentation, under the Fair Credit Reporting Act Section 611. Filing fee was 0. Paper trail was permanent. The third action was an email to my personal attorney, James Okafor, sent at 9:03 a.m. 3 sentences. I told him I had identified potential identity fraud involving family members, that I had preliminary documentation, and that I needed a consultation within 48 hours. James responded at 9:41 a.m. confirming Thursday at 2 p.m. The fourth action was the one that would be felt by noon. My mother had been listed as an authorized contact on my Frost Bank account since 2020, added during a period when I had traveled internationally for a client engagement and needed someone local for emergencies. I submitted a formal removal request for that authorization at 10:14 a.m. The removal was processed and confirmed at 11:47 a.m. At 11:52 a.m., my phone showed a missed call from my mother. Then another at 11:54 a.m. Then a text at 11:58 a.m. that said simply, "The card isn't working." She had tried to use the supplementary card I had never officially given her but had never officially cancelled. That card had been linked to account 7732. I read her message. I set my phone face down on the desk. I walked to the sandwich place 2 blocks from my apartment and ordered a turkey club on sourdough. It cost $13.40. I sat by the window and ate the entire thing without checking my phone once. When I returned, there were 9 missed calls. My mother, 3 times. Hannah, 4 times. A number I did not recognize, twice. I opened my laptop and updated the case file. I added a new tab, tab 5. I labeled it Post-Freeze Communications and began logging every missed call with its timestamp. By 3 p.m. there were 14 entries in tab 5. By 6 p.m. there were 22. By the time I went to bed at 10:30 p.m. there were 31. I slept without difficulty. The documentation was current. The accounts were frozen. The attorney was confirmed for Thursday. Everything else was just noise. Hannah called at 7:03 a.m. on October 8th. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. I know because I played it once, noted the duration in my log, and saved the audio file under the file name, Hannah voicemail, 100822024-0703 in a folder I had labeled, Incoming, October 2024. I did not play it a second time. I did not need to. The structure was familiar, I had heard variations of it my entire adult life. It opened with confusion. Then it moved to injury. Then it arrived, right on schedule, at accusation. She said I had frozen accounts without warning. She said our mother was distressed. She said I was punishing the family for losing my job, that I was taking my professional failure out on people who loved me. She used the phrase, "This is not like you," twice, which was interesting, because what she meant was, "This is not like the version of you that we preferred." I transcribed the key accusations into my case notes. Timestamp, content, classification. I labeled each claim as either emotionally manipulative or factually disputable. Hannah's voicemail contained 6 claims in the first category and 2 in the second. The 2 factually disputable ones I flagged for specific rebuttal documentation. My mother's approach arrived by text, which was unusual for her. She preferred phone calls because phone calls leave no written record. The fact that she was texting told me someone had advised her to do so. That someone was almost certainly not a lawyer, because a lawyer would have advised her to say nothing at all. Her texts arrived in a cluster between 9:14 a.m. and 9:47 a.m. 11 messages. I screenshot each one individually, named each file with the timestamp, and saved them to a subfolder. The messages moved through the same emotional architecture as Hannah's voicemail: confusion, then injury, then accusation, but my mother added a layer that Hannah had not. She invoked my father. She said he would be ashamed of what I was doing to this family. She said he had worked to keep us together and I was dismantling everything he built. She said I had always been cold, even as a child, and that my father had worried about that coldness. I read that message at 9:52 a.m. I noted it. I saved it. I labeled it, Mother, Text, 100822024-0952.png. Then I opened the MindBridge report and added 3 more flagged transactions I had identified overnight to my master documentation file. The threat came on October 10th. It came from an email address I did not recognize, a Gmail account created, according to its account naming convention, very recently. The email was addressed to me formally, used my full legal name, and stated that a family associate with experience in financial matters had reviewed the situation and believed I had mishandled funds entrusted to me by my mother over a period of years. It said that if I did not restore account access and cease what it called retaliatory financial obstruction within 72 hours, this associate would file a complaint with the Texas State Board of Public Accountancy against my CPA license. I read that email 3 times. Not because it frightened me. Because I wanted to appreciate it fully. My CPA license was clean. It had been clean for 11 years. My documentation was current, sourced, and certified. My professional conduct record contained 0 complaints, 0 sanctions, and 0 inquiries. A complaint to the Texas State Board of Public Accountancy would trigger a review. A review would require me to submit my professional records. My professional records were the most organized documents in this entire situation. They were threatening me with scrutiny of my paperwork. I forwarded the email to James Okafor at 2:17 p.m. with a single line of context. I labeled the forwarded message, "Potential extortion attempt, see attached." James responded at 3:44 p.m. with 4 words. "Save everything. See you Thursday." I saved everything. I had already been saving everything. Thursday arrived gray and steady, the kind of October morning that Austin rarely produces, but that felt, on October 10, 2024, entirely appropriate. I met James Okafor at his office on Congress Avenue at 2 p.m. exactly. I placed my documentation folder on his desk. It was 2.5 inches thick. Tabbed, indexed, and cross-referenced. James is not a man who shows surprise easily. 17 years of civil litigation will do that to a person, but he was quiet for a long moment after he opened to tab 1. Then he said, "How long did this take you?" I said, 7 days. He said, "All right. Let's build the case." We agreed on 4 simultaneous documentation tracks. Each one running in parallel. Each one feeding the others. I want to walk you through each track carefully, because the architecture matters. In fraud investigation, a single strong finding is a claim. For corroborated findings are a conviction. Track 1 was the identity theft documentation. I engaged a forensic credit specialist named Patricia Wu, CPA, CFE, a certified fraud examiner I had worked alongside on a corporate case in 2022, at her consulting rate of $295 per hour. Patricia pulled a full Tribureau credit analysis across Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, cross-referenced all 3 unauthorized accounts against my documented financial history, and produced a 34-page identity theft impact report. Her conclusion was stated without qualification. All 3 accounts showed origination patterns inconsistent with my financial behavior, were opened using a device registered to a Cedar Park IP address, and carried spending patterns concentrated in zip codes within 2 miles of my mother's home. Patricia's invoice came to $3,245. I paid it the day the report arrived. Track 2 was the unauthorized transaction chain. MindBridge AI auditor had flagged 23 anomalous transactions across my Frost Bank account between August 2021 and October 2024. Total value of flagged transactions, $38,774.19. I compiled each transaction into a master ledger, cross-referenced the destination account numbers against Clear's business registration database, and confirmed that 14 of the 23 transfers had landed in accounts connected to either my mother's name or HY Consulting Group, Hannah's LLC. Track 3 was the HY Consulting Group corporate record. Through the Texas Secretary of State's online portal, SOS Direct, public access, zero cost, I pulled the full filing history for the LLC. Registration date January 9, 2023. Registered agent, Hannah Yoon. Registered address, my mother's Cedar Park home. I then cross-referenced the LLC's registered address against Frost Bank's transaction records and confirmed 11 direct transfers from my account to HY Consulting's business checking between February and September 2023. Total value, $24,610. None of them authorized by me. Track 4 required the most precision because it involved a regulatory body I could not control. On October 14, 2024, I filed a formal identity theft complaint with the Federal Trade Commission through their identitytheft.gov portal. Case number FTC 2024 ATX 00441. I attached Patricia Wu's 34-page report, the Mind Bridge Anomaly Summary, the SOS Direct corporate filings, and a 12-page personal statement I had drafted over 2 evenings, reviewed by James, and notarized on October 13 at 4:15 p.m. I also filed a separate complaint with the Austin Field Office of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit on October 15 at 10:30 a.m. The intake agent, whose name I have on file, asked me 4 questions during our initial call. I answered each one in under 60 seconds. She told me the matter would be assigned to a case agent within 21 business days. The total documented financial exposure across all 4 tracks came to $73,441.18. That was the number I had found on October 3rd. It had not changed. What had changed was that it was now sourced, certified, cross-referenced, and submitted to 2 federal bodies. James reviewed the complete file on October 16. He looked up from the last page and said the same thing every attorney says when the documentation is airtight. He said nothing. He just nodded once. That nod was enough. My mother called on a Saturday morning. October 19, 8:47 a.m. Saturday mornings were her preferred time for difficult conversations. I had understood this pattern since I was 16. The logic was consistent. Weekend mornings carry a softness that weekdays do not, and she had always believed that softness could be transferred to the person she needed something from. She had used Saturday mornings to ask me to co-sign Hannah's first apartment lease. She had used one to tell me about the second mortgage she had taken without mentioning it to anyone. She had used them so consistently and so deliberately that I had, for the past 3 weeks, been anticipating exactly this call. Her voice was different from the texts. Quieter. Carefully modulated, the particular register she used when she had rehearsed the conversation more than once and wanted it to sound unrehearsed. She said she missed me. She said things had become confused and complicated in ways she did not fully understand. She said she wanted to sit down, just the 3 of us, her, Hannah, and me, without lawyers or banks or paperwork, and simply talk the way a family should talk. That phrase, the way a family should talk, was a precision instrument. I recognized it immediately. I asked her, calmly, what specifically she wanted to discuss. She said she wanted to explain certain financial decisions. She said there were things I did not have the full context for. She said that if I just came home and listened, would understand that everything had been done with my well-being in mind. I wrote the word well-being on my notepad and underlined it. Then I analyzed the proposal. Not emotionally. Structurally. The location she suggested was her house in Cedar Park, their chosen terrain, a space where 31 years of family history lived in every room. Psychological advantage, maximum. The timing was the following Sunday at noon, a day when James Okafor's office would be closed and my ability to make formal legal calls would be limited. The framing, no lawyers, no paperwork, was designed to extract a conversation that could later be characterized as an informal family agreement rather than a legally documented exchange. And the audience would be exactly two people who had, between them, opened 3 fraudulent credit accounts, transferred $38,774.19 without authorization, and registered a shell LLC at a family address to receive funds from my personal checking account. It was a well-constructed trap. I gave her credit for the architecture. I told her Sunday at noon worked perfectly. After the call, I spent 90 minutes preparing. I did not bring everything. Overwhelming people too early makes them defensive, and defensive people stop talking. I needed them talking. I needed them on record, in their own words, confirming the version of events they had been circulating for 3 weeks. I contacted James at 9:44 a.m. and asked him to keep his phone on Sunday between noon and 2 p.m. He confirmed without requesting details. I then drove to Best Buy on Research Boulevard and purchased a Sony ICD UX570 digital voice recorder, $89.99, paid in cash. I reviewed Texas Penal Code Section 16.02, which governs unlawful interception of communications. Texas is a one-party consent state for in-person conversations. I was going to be a participant. I charged the recorder to full capacity that night. I checked the battery indicator 4 times. I set it on my nightstand next to my phone, my documentation folder, and the 3 tabs I had selected to bring, not all of them, just the 3 that would land hardest after they had finished speaking. Sunday morning arrived cool and clear. I dressed in dark slacks and a gray blazer, professional enough to signal intention, understated enough not to telegraph preparation. I drove the 22 minutes to Cedar Park with the recorder in my blazer pocket, the folder on the passenger seat, and the particular quality of stillness in my chest that comes not from the absence of feeling. It comes from the completion of preparation. They were both in the kitchen when I arrived. My mother was at the stove, making tea she did not need to make, occupying her hands the way she always did when she was managing anxiety. Hannah was at the table with her phone face down in front of her, which was new. Hannah's phone was never face down. Someone had told her to put it away. Someone had coached this meeting in advance. There was a third person. A man I did not recognize sat at the far end of the table with a yellow notepad and a careful, neutral expression. My mother introduced him as a family friend named Greg Solis who had, she said, some experience in financial disputes. I checked Greg Solis against the Texas State Bar database on my phone in the driveway before I had come inside. No record. He was not a lawyer. I sat down. I placed my folder on the table face down. I folded my hands on top of it and waited. My mother opened. Her version was polished, more polished than the texts, more polished than the Saturday phone call. She spoke about family obligation. She spoke about the years she had raised 2 daughters alone after my father left. She spoke about how money had always moved fluidly in this family, how the boundaries between mine and ours had never been rigid, how everything she had ever done had been motivated by love and necessity and nothing else. It was 14 minutes. I timed it on my watch. I let her finish completely. Then Hannah spoke. Her version was shorter and more aggressive. She said I had overreacted. She said the transfers were informal loans that had always been intended for repayment. She said HY Consulting Group was a legitimate business and that any deposits from my account had been made with my knowledge and consent. I let that sit in the air for exactly 4 seconds. Then I asked her to confirm, clearly and specifically, that every transfer from my Frost Bank account ending in 7732 to HY Consulting Group's business checking had been made with my full knowledge and authorization. She said yes. Without hesitation. Greg Solis wrote something on his notepad. I want you to stop for just a moment right here. Think about what it feels like to watch someone look directly at documented evidence of what they did, and still choose the lie. Not because they think they can win, but because lying is the only move they have left. Have you ever watched someone do that? Have you ever been in a room where the truth was already on the table and someone chose the lie anyway? Because that is exactly where I was at 12:34 p.m. on October 20, 2024. I opened the folder. I placed Patricia Wu's 34-page identity theft impact report in the center of the table and slid it toward Greg Solis, because Greg was the one with the notepad and Greg needed to understand the situation before anyone else in the room did. He picked it up. He read the executive summary. His pen stopped moving. Then I placed the MindBridge anomaly report on the table. 23 flagged transactions. $38,774.19. Each one sourced, dated, and traced to destination accounts connected to either my mother or HY Consulting Group. I named each account number out loud, slowly, so that the Sony ICD UX570 in my blazer pocket captured every digit clearly. My mother's teacup stopped halfway to her mouth. Then I placed the SOS Direct corporate filing for HY Consulting Group on the table. Registration date. Registered agent. Registered address. Hannah's full legal name in the top right corner of the document, exactly as she had signed it on January 9, 2023. Hannah looked at the document. Then she looked at my mother. My mother looked at the table. I said, on October 14, I filed a formal identity theft complaint with the Federal Trade Commission. Case number FTC 2024 ATX 00441. On October 15, I filed a separate complaint with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit at the Austin Field Office. Both complaints include Patricia Wu's certified report, the MindBridge transaction analysis, and the complete SOS Direct filing history for HY Consulting Group. The room was very quiet. Greg Solis set Patricia Wu's report down. He looked at Hannah with an expression that required no interpretation, the expression of a man who had been given an incomplete picture of a situation and was now rapidly recalculating his involvement. I reached into my blazer pocket. I placed the Sony ICD UX570 on the table between us. I did not turn it off. I left it running. Then I said, Texas is a one-party consent state. I am a party to this conversation. Everything said in this room today is legally recorded. My mother said my name. Just my name. The way she said it when I was small and had done something that frightened her. Small. Uncertain. The voice of someone who had just realized that the room they thought they controlled had belonged to someone else entirely from the moment they walked in. I looked at her. I held eye contact for 3 full seconds. Nobody said anything for a long time after that. The consequences did not arrive dramatically. They arrived the way serious consequences always arrive, procedurally, incrementally, and exactly on schedule. The FBI Financial Crimes Case Agent made first contact with my mother on November 6, 2024, at 10:22 a.m. I know this because my mother called me 11 minutes later, not texting, calling, and told me in a voice I had never heard from her before that a federal agent had appeared at her front door asking questions about HY Consulting Group and a series of financial transactions connected to my Social Security number. I told her I could not discuss the matter as I was a complaining witness in an active federal investigation. I recommended she retain counsel immediately. Then I ended the call and updated my case log. Hannah's situation moved faster. The Texas Secretary of State's office launched a formal review of HY Consulting Group on November 12, following a referral from the FBI case agent. The review flagged 3 irregularities in the LLC's registration documentation, all related to the source of initial operating capital, which traced directly back to the unauthorized transfers from my Frost Bank account. The LLC's operating status was suspended on November 19, 2024, at 3:41 p.m. I received a Prop Alert-style automated notification through SOS Direct at 4:02 p.m. I printed it. I hole-punched it. I added it to the folder as tab 9. The credit accounts were next. All 3 fraudulent accounts carrying my Social Security number were formally flagged as identity theft by the issuing institutions following the FTC complaint resolution on November 21. The accounts were closed, the balances discharged against fraud insurance, and my credit file was restored to its pre-fraud status by December 3. My FICO score, which had dropped from 811 to 724 during the period the fraudulent accounts were active, returned to 809 within 30 days of the corrections posting. 2 points below where I started. I noted that without sentiment. My mother's financial position collapsed more quietly but more completely than anything else. The Cedar Park house carried a second mortgage she had taken in March 2022. $47,000 borrowed against equity she had spent rather than preserved. With the HY Consulting LLC suspended and Hannah's income from that entity eliminated, the mortgage payments fell into arrears by December. The lender issued a notice of default on December 28, 2024. James Okafor confirmed receipt of a copy addressed to me as a previously listed emergency contact, a designation I had never formally authorized but which my mother had added without my knowledge in 2021. I had James send a formal written request for my removal from that record on January 3, 2025. Confirmed and processed by January 9. Hannah retained a criminal defense attorney in mid-November, a solo practitioner whose name appeared in the Austin American-Statesman's public court filings database in late January. The federal investigation remained open and active as of my last formal notification, received through proper channels and reviewed without urgency. I filed the final fraud case closure documentation with James on January 14, 2025. He submitted it to the relevant institutions at 11:30 a.m. I walked out of his office onto Congress Avenue into a Tuesday that was cold and clear and entirely unremarkable. I stood on the sidewalk for the amount of time it took me to confirm I felt what I expected to feel. Clean. Finished. Precise. People ask me if I grieve what my family used to be. I tell them the truth. Which is that I am not sure it was ever what I believed it was. What I grieve, if I am being precise, is the version of myself that kept paying, not just in money, but in silence, in patience, in the steady willingness to be the person who handled things while others laughed at the handling. That version of me absorbed $73,441.18 in documented fraud. She made $41,220 in voluntary transfers she called love. She built a career on finding hidden money for strangers while her own family moved it through her name without asking. She was not weak. She was simply operating on incomplete information. That changes the moment you run the numbers honestly. What I gained from this process is not satisfaction. Satisfaction implies the outcome was pleasurable. This was not pleasurable. It was necessary. What I gained was the permanent, documented, legally verified knowledge that I did everything correctly, that my records were clean, my conduct was sound, and every action I took from October 3rd forward was measured, sourced, and beyond dispute. I also kept the folder. It sits in my home office between two consulting client files I am currently working. I do not open it often. But I know exactly how many tabs it holds, and that knowledge is its own quiet form of peace. Before I close, I want to leave you with one question. Not about my family. About yours. About anyone who has ever handed you a bill for love, who has made their need your emergency, their choices your debt, their survival your professional responsibility. When you look at that relationship honestly, with the same precision you would bring to anything else that mattered, what do the numbers actually say? Because the numbers always say something. Most people are simply afraid to add them up. My name is Rachel Yoon. I am 31 years old. I am a certified public accountant specializing in forensic accounting and financial fraud detection. I find hidden money for a living. Including, when necessary, my own.